circulatory system, you covered the digestive system already. So you should get an understanding about how we're interacting with the environment. So how does this relate to the respiratory system? Basically, with a complex body, a simple animal, maybe like a rotifer, right? Rotifers are animals, or like a protist, like a paramecium or something, or small and maybe one cell, they can diffuse gases and ions and nutrients right through your body. We're big. A cat's body's big. It can't diffuse oxygen from the atmosphere right, through its fur and through its skin, and fish can't do that either. So how do big animals exchange things with the environment? What are the adaptations to allow this to happen? Think about the digestive system, what we already covered, or the circulatory system. How is it designed to get things from the outside to the inside, to every cell in the body? Hey, how is the digestive system adapted, what you know from a shark anatomy or the cat anatomy, to interact with the external environment? And yes, the digestive system is the external environment, right? The animal's ingesting food from the outside. But how are we digesting that to small enough pieces that can get into the animal's body? Right? If your stomach's full right now, that stuff's not in your body yet. It's just sitting in a compartment, right? Mechanically and chemically breaking down. What specializations does the digestive system or the respiratory system have that you might know about from other classes or from what we talked about in the last couple of weeks? Think about that. Think about the small intestine, for example.
Can you repeat that again? Just the question here.
Yes. So, with an example maybe from the digestive system, how does a complex animal like a shark anatomy or a cat, when we studied in lab, how is the digestive system designed or modified to interact with the environment so we can move materials from the external environment to the body cells? How is it specialized? When I said, think about the small intestine as an example. Okay, it has to absorb. But what are the modifications for the intestine to make absorption rapid enough?
I guess like with sharks, how like water kind of circulates through their body, and they have to always like exchange it.
Okay,
That has to be
exchanging.
adapted for that.
And what are the shapes? Were you going to say something or somebody else? What's the shape look like in the intestine?
It's a big long tube that.
Yeah, it's long, it's folded up, right, to give it a big surface area. They may have branching compartments. You've got the spiral valve of the intestine of the shark. I know some of you cut the spiral valve open a couple weeks ago. That makes the food stay in the intestine longer, and it gives it a bigger area. The same intestinal modifications, in an amniote or in a mammal more specifically, you've got a folded up intestine with a bunch of tiny structures that give a big surface area to exchange with the environment. The circulatory system does that too. You go from big blood vessels to medium-sized blood vessels to teeny tiny blood vessels to capillaries to exchange with the tissues internally. But really, we're just talking about adaptations that are specialized to make the surface area bigger to interact with the environment. So you're getting specializations of either branching, of tubes to get smaller and smaller, or compartmentalization or folding that allow sufficient area to exchange with the environment. You can think of a vertebrate animal as just a sack of tubes, right? Here's an animal's body. It can be a vertebrate animal wherever. It's just a blob of chemicals wrapped up in some connective tissue and epithelial tissue, but we can relate all the organ systems that are interacting with the external environment. And if we just fold up these tubes or make the surface area bigger or make it branch into smaller and smaller compartments, then we can respire, we can exchange gases, we can collect nutrients, we can distribute nutrients to the circulatory system, we can eliminate waste products. Okay, we're not gonna go over the urinary system in this class in any detail, but maybe in other classes like that. But basically, when animals are big, they have to get a respiratory system that allows a big enough area to get oxygen in and get rid of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is toxic, right? It's gonna be toxic if it accumulates, and it can cause fluids in the body to become acidic, and that's bad, right? So you get branching and smaller structures that are microscopic. So the anatomy goes down to the cellular level, and then the tissue level to accommodate this exchanging with the environment. So we already did circulatory system, we already did digestive system. And again, we're gonna do respiratory system in this week. So we'll talk about respiratory organs and how, machine. I updated this and it did not download from the internet fast enough. We'll talk about the ventilatory respiratory mechanisms. It's basically muscular pumps to pump air or water across the respiratory membrane. Talk about gas bladder evolution. We won't get to this today because we're talking about the exam, but we'll do countercurrent systems on Wednesday. So basically, the respiratory system works with the circulatory system, and the movement of gases relies on diffusion. Right? There's a concentration gradient based on the pressure of the gases dissolved in the body's fluids, like the circulatory system and blood, or in the pressure of gases in the atmosphere or in water if the vertebrates are aquatic. But it relies on diffusion, so it doesn't cost any energy, right? So to have diffusion occur, there has to be a favorable gradient for which these products can move. So O2 in, CO2 out. And that's true of all animals, because all animals are basically heterotrophic consumers and rely on respiration processes to power metabolism in metabolic pathways. So there has to be a concentration gradient, okay? And to make it more efficient and to work, it has to be a big area because there's resistance, right? If you imagine an elephant, if there was an elephant here, or you imagine a whale swimming in the ocean, to go from its surface to the interior of its body is such a far distance that it would take forever for any chemicals to diffuse, through all those layers of cells and tissues. Okay, and then think about our body. The deep core in our body, to go from even the surface of the abdomen, into the stomach, it's a matter of centimeters, but you can't diffuse that. So there has to be a big surface area to allow this to happen rapidly, because the inspired gases or the mixture of water flowing over gills, it's only in contact with the capillaries for a second, and then that blood is pumped out. So it has to happen very quickly. So really, we think of just respiration as there's two types of respiration. There's internal respiration at the tissues, and there's kind of external respiration with the lungs or the gills, simplify it, right? So external respiration with the environment, and internal respiration, where that gas is delivered to the body's tissues. And simple coordination of how the circulatory system and respiratory system work together. So in an aquatic vertebrate, like a bony fish, right, we already went over the circulatory system. They got single loop circulation. Blood goes from the body, systemic tissues to the heart, then to the gills, and then back to the body. Double circulation, like in an amnio. Blood goes, of course, from the heart to the lung, then back to the heart, and then the body. So if we just put those circulatory routes here, and just add where the respiratory surface is going to be, basically a fish opens its mouth and pumps water over its respiratory surface, gill, and then that oxygenates the blood and offloads CO2. And then the same thing happens in a tetrapod or an amnio, where again, inspired air, lung, that blood goes to the heart and goes to the body. So we can coordinate between circulation and respiratory systems. So we call breathing just ventilation. It's an active process for most vertebrates. In fishes, it's mostly one way. It's mostly unidirectional, meaning water flows in through the mouth, over the gills, and leaves in a one-way process. Lung ventilation is mostly bidirectional, meaning air is inspired into the lung and then it expires tidally, right? Inflow and then outflow. For most lung breathers, it's bidirectional. You're going to learn that crocodiles and birds have the most sophisticated respiratory systems ever evolved, and air flows over the lung one way. It's remarkable, how it works. So we got mostly one-way in fishes and two-way in tetrapods. Now, look, obviously, as you heard from the video, at least LaFleur did, fishes breathe with gills. Okay? And it's okay that a Bio 2 student doesn't get that the first time, but you should know that by now. Gills are designed for breathing in water. Okay? Gills are designed for breathing in water. You've got incredibly dense capillary networks on the gill lamellae. We saw these in lab in the shark. We can review them again today or next week. The gills, of course, are supported by the branchial arches, whether it be cartilaginous in sharks or bony arches in ray fin fishes. But that holds the gill lamellae, the primary and secondary lamellae, and water comes in the mouth through the buccal and pharyngeal cavity, flows past the gills, and leaves either through the external gill slits, which sharks have 5 pairs, or through the single external opening that bony fishes have. But again, that's for aquatic. So think about the diversity of fishes that have gills. Again, we've got jawless fishes like lamprey. They've got 7 sets of gill openings. So again, water comes in the mouth, flows over the respiratory membrane on the gill and goes out the opening. Same for the shark, except they usually have 5. For the most part, sharks have 5 gill openings. There's a couple that have 6, a couple that have more. And then in bony fish have 4 pairs of gills, but there's usually just a single opening because it's covered by the bony operculum, the gill cover, if you will. So there's only a single external opening. The water would flow in the mouth, into the branchial cavity, across the gills and out. But all this is one-way flow for the most part, okay? In the mouth, through the pharynx, out the gill openings. Okay, unidirectional. Lungs are designed for breathing in air. Shocker, okay? With tetrapods and the terrestrial habits. They already had lungs. They already pre-evolved in fishes. The lungs were already there. But basically connected to the external environment via a tube. We call that tube the trachea. You've probably seen that in a cat. You definitely see it in the lab today. If you didn't see it when we were doing the muscles or we did some of the digestive tract anatomy a couple weeks ago, we looked at the trachea. But the trachea is a tube to conduct air. It's not for breathing, right? It's not for respiration. It's just conducting passageway to get air towards the lungs. It's got to be covered. Right? It's covered by the epiglottis. Probably saw that in lab. It's basically a cartilage that can close over the glottis so that any ingested foods or liquids don't aspire into the lung. That would lead to choking, right? Into that gag reflex. Generally, the trachea divides into 2 bronchi, one for each lung. Most vertebrates have paired lungs. Some specialized vertebrates have lost one lung and they really just got one long lung. Think about a snake. But generally, it's branching into 2 primary bronchi, right and left, and then each primary bronchus branches into secondary bronchi and tertiary, smaller. We'll do the lung dissection in cat today, and maybe on one side of the pleural cavity, you can remove part of the lung or one of the lobes of the lung, and you can dissect it and look for the bronchi. You'll see that they are, they're macroscopic tubes. They're big enough to see with the naked eye. Some fishes that don't have lungs have a gas bladder. And basically, you're talking about ray fin fishes, most of them have a gas bladder. Okay? It's really elongate, okay, and pretty thin walled, but it's basically just a sac filled with gas. Now, it's not always atmospheric gas, right? Because not all fishes have a connection of their gas bladder to the external environment. So there's two types of gas bladders in fishes. The gas bladder in fishes is dorsal, that is, it's above the digestive tract. That's important, and it basically runs more or less the whole body cavity. But there's two types. Ones that have a duct or a breathing duct that connects to the digestive tract are called phystostomas. Okay, stoma is opening. So there's an opening to the digestive tract, meaning that these fishes can go to the surface, gulp air, swallow it, and force it into their gas bladder. Or if they want to go deep in the water column where pressure is greater and adjust their buoyancy, they can literally burp or fart out gas from their gas bladder using the digestive tract. Phystocelistus fishes don't have that connection. So they have a gas bladder, but they have no way to swallow air or expel air. So really, a phystocelistus connection, we'll talk about it in the next class, to adjust the pressure in the bladder, they have to use the circulatory system. Okay? Gas can be diffused into blood vessels to reduce its volume, or it can take gas from blood vessels to increase the volume. Okay? Generally, when you think about bony fishes, the gas bladder function can be for breathing or buoyancy, but those two conditions are not exclusive. Right? You've got a fish that's got a gas-filled sac in it, it's going to help keep it buoyant, right? Help it float, because bones are heavy, the fish would sink. But it's also can be used for respiration, because if there's oxygen in there, that can, as long as there's blood vessels nearby, that can diffuse into the circulatory system. So the function is for buoyancy and or respiration, but they're not mutually exclusive of one another. This is a typical gas bladder of a teleost fish. Sometimes they're one compartment, sometimes they're divided. This one's got two compartments. Anterior would be to the left in this picture. Some have three compartments or more, where they get these kind of pinch divisions with connective tissue kind of wrapping around it. If you're an angler or cleaned a bony fish that you caught or you got somehow, and when you're filleting it, you generally want to pull the guts out, or you want to get the gas bladder out too. It's pretty tough connective tissue, but yeah, you can puncture it and the gas will leak out. If you're fishing in relatively deep water, modestly deep on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, for example, even 60 feet, 80 feet of water trying to catch snapper or something, and you yank it to the surface too fast, what's going to happen? Anyone fish? What's bulging out, Jess?
Yeah.
Have you seen? It's pressure trauma. Basically, the gas bladder expands too quickly because the pressure on the bottom of the water, even modestly deep water at 40, 60 feet, is many times the atmosphere is more pressure than at the surface. The animal can control its gas volume quickly enough, and the bladder expands when it comes to the surface, and it causes the eyes to bulge, or it causes the stomach to avert out the mouth, and that's usually fatal for the animal. The problem is anglers that are not aware of potential barotrauma to sport and game fish, right? You get excited, you yank it up the surface, and it's too small to keep, and you have to throw it back, it's going to die anyway. So you throw it there, and like a tuna comes by and eats it, or you're just basically feeding pelicans at that point. You can treat barotrauma. If you catch a fish and it's a protected species, or it's too small, and it's got barotrauma where you can see the eyes bulging, or you can see the stomach or the gas bladder coming out the mouth or out the cloaca, you can puncture it. You can put a needle in it and release that gas, and the animal might survive. But it's usually too much trauma that it can accommodate. Again, I already said this stuff. So we would call swim bladder and gas bladder. A gas bladder that controls buoyancy, we just call it swim bladder, and the names are often used interchangeably. But if that bladder has got blood vessels, if it's got access to capillary network, it can be used for some respiration. Okay, so really, what are the difference between swim bladders and lungs? Because lungfish have lungs, right? They evolved lungs as sarcopterygians evolved before tetrapods came on shore. So really, what's the difference? In general, the differences are there's three. Swim bladders are dorsal. Okay, they're gonna be dorsal digestive tract. The lungs are usually ventral. Okay. Swim bladders are usually single, not paired. But they can be compartmentalized, as I mentioned a minute ago. Lungs are almost always paired, except in some specialized vertebrates. And then lastly, the blood that's leaving the swim bladder, it doesn't go directly to the heart, right? Blood that leaves a lung goes right to the heart. So blood that leaves the swim bladder is going into the systemic circulation first, then goes to the heart. So you got different circulatory systems set up, obviously because there's no pulmonary route in bony fishes. And then generally single and then dorsal. And then what are some of the similarities? And are these structures homologous? It's still kind of debated because some of the similarities are anatomical, especially how they form. Okay? Swim bladders and lungs both form as outpocketings of the gut or the pharynx. So they're basically compartments that grow off the endodermal tube in an embryo, but they come from different areas of the alimentary canal, either from the pharynx or more posteriorly, the esophagus or even the stomach. So are they homologous? I mean, we don't really know exactly yet because there are some differences of where they form. And then these structures are absent in cartilaginous fishes and all the jawless fishes and placoderms, which is an extinct group that we didn't spend that much time talking about. So swim bladders and lungs evolved in the shared common ancestor between Actinopterygii and Sarcopterygii. So this is after cartilaginous fishes have their own evolutionary line. Again, jawless fishes have their own evolutionary line. And this is summarized in table 11.5 or figure 11.5. Basically what you're seeing here is a simple dendrogram or phylogenetic tree of vertebrate classes, or even at the higher level classes, just as amnio here. We can see chondrichthyes, they don't have any of these structures, so that we use as kind of our like outgroup here. And then basically lungs evolved way back here between the ancestor that's shared with chondrichthyes and all the other vertebrate groups, exclusive of the jawless fishes. And what we see on this figure on the top, above the diagram, you're getting the very top picture is a lateral view or sagittal view of what the gut and the gas bladder or lung look like. So the gut tube in these three is ventral, and then the gas bladder is dorsal. Right? In Teleos and bowfin and early Actinopterygians. In bikers, which is a group we didn't talk about, lungfishes, which we did talk about, amnios, of course, you've got paired lungs that are ventral of the gut tube. So you got a lateral view, and then you got a cross section. So something like a bony fish, you've got the gut tube, and then it's connected to the gas bladder by a duct, or that duct might be lost. This is just showing stuff. So it's showing the development of the gas bladder versus lungs. And then we can plot those characters on this phylogenetic tree. Now the dashed lines represent some species have lost the gas bladder. Fishes, for example, that are benthic, that live on the bottom of the stream or pond or ocean, they don't need gas bladder, they live on the bottom. They don't have it anymore. Sturgeons, for most part, don't have gas bladder. It's been lost. For most part. So that gives us a summary diagram, but again, lungs evolved well before tetrapods, moved the land. So it was pre-adaptive. And lungs and gas bladder are still present. These are all living species. Remember, all the representatives here are all living. Both ring gar, sturgeon, these are early Actinopterygian fishes. Teleos is our specialized group of Actinopterygian fishes. And then you've got the Sarcopterygian groups here. Lungfish, and then all the tetrapods as an example. So, simple summary diagram of gas bladder evolution. What you can see here, I didn't talk about yet, we'll talk about the pumping mechanisms in a minute. That's really weird sirening sound. We'll talk about these mechanisms to ventilate the respiratory surface in a minute. All right, so I'm going to take a break. Is there any questions about the introduction or this picture?
Surgeons are typically like bottom views, huh?
Yeah, they're benthic. Yeah. Yeah, they got the inferior mouth. They're basically swimming on the bottoms of lakes or rivers or in marine environments, sucking up stuff off the bottom. So, no gas bladder. All right, there's other ways to respire. Some vertebrates can respire through the skin. They do cutaneous respiration. Basically, the skin acts as a supplementary air breathing structure because the skin may be highly vascularized, and if the animal's in water and the water's got a lot of oxygen, they have something like a stream, a flowing stream where it's got a lot of turbulence, you get a lot of oxygen, that can act. So we talk about frogs. Frogs have tiny lungs for the most part, and they have a highly vascularized skin because they're doing a lot of respiration through their skin. There's a whole family of salamanders that totally have evolved to lose the lungs. So they do completely cutaneous respiration in plethodontids. And we talk about mammals and birds maybe and reptiles. Okay, reptiles got scaly skin, birds got feathers, mammals got fur and tough skin. There's not a lot of respiration done through the skin. I did mention that turtles can breathe through the butts. Okay, freshwater turtles can spend the whole winter in a temperate area where the surface of the pond may be frozen and still be fine because there's enough oxygen in that really cold water that they can respire through the full wake up. So breathe through your butt, basically. But mammals can't do that, birds can't do that. Example here, this is we call them a snot otter, is the inappropriate common name. This is a hellbender. This is the largest salamander in North America. They get about this long. See how the skin is all folded? They do a lot of, these are fully aquatic salamanders. They do a lot of respiration through skin. So by having all these folds, as I said in the introduction, that increases the area to facilitate diffusion with the environment. Hellbenders are awesome. Really, really cool. There's 2 species in North America. This is the most widely distributed one. It's called, this common name, hellbender. Basically lives throughout highland areas where there's has to be pristine, clean, cold water. But we're running out of that in Eastern North America. The waters are warming, they're getting polluted, or the rivers are getting dammed, for flood control and navigation. But and there's one that lives in the Ozarks, and further west and further north. And that one's critically endangered. The Ozark hellbender only has a couple places where it lives. There's a giant salamander in Japan, which is huge, like this big. It's like as big as it's like a cane. But these are our giant salamanders in North America. And then quickly, I'll just go over the ventilatory mechanisms. Tiny animals, like I mentioned, for example, even cephalochordates, right? Their body is small enough that it can use ciliate pumps to create a flow of water. But animals get bigger and the mass increases, cilia doesn't work because they're microscopic. So we need some way to move either air or water across the ventilatory surface to accommodate the needs of a bigger animal that's got higher metabolic demands. So there's a couple of muscular mechanisms that we want to use, okay? Essentially, in fish, there's 2 ways a fish can do it. They can swim with their mouth open. So they're powering their muscular mechanism with axial muscle to swim, and when it wants to breathe, it opens its mouth. We call this ram ventilation. This is what pelagic sharks do. This is what tuna do. They swim all day, they never stop, so to breathe, they just open their mouth and they're swimming, and water flows right over it, okay? So it's a muscular mechanism, but this is dealing with muscles from the axial musculature. More common muscular pumps are in the buccal region and the pharynx, basically to pump water into the mouth or pump air into the lungs. And these are a couple types of different muscular pumps. I'm gonna play this short clip, it's only about a minute long video, just talking about these muscular pumps. If I have it, where do you go here, I think. And yes, fish live in water.
Almost all fish, land animals, almost all fish breathe or get their oxygen from water. Instead of using lungs, fish breathe with organs called gills. Most fish have 4 pairs of gills enclosed in a gill chamber on each side of the head. On the outside of the body, a flap of bone called a gill cover protects the gills of bony fish. To get oxygen, fish gulp water through the mouth and pump it over the gills. In many fish, the breathing process begins when the gill covers close and the mouth opens. The walls of the mouth then move inward. The mouth partially closes and the gill covers open. This action forces the water from the mouth into the gill chambers. The inside of each gill consists of fleshy, thread-like filaments. Water from the mouth passes over the filaments. The filaments are closely spaced along a gill arch in 2 rows. Each filament has many tiny extensions called lamellae. Blood flowing through the lamella takes oxygen from the water and releases carbon dioxide into the water. After the fish receives its oxygen, the water passes out through the gill openings and the breathing process begins again.
Well, we'll go over the details of those, how fishes breathe and mechanisms of that in the next class. But the whole point of just showing that animation, most fishes have a buccal pump where they're opening and closing the mouth synchronously with opening and closing the gill cover to draw water in, so they don't have to swim all the time. Meaning they can be stationary in a water column, or they can be sitting on the bottom, or they can be near the surface. Instead of having to swim to breathe, they can just open and close the mouth and gill covers to pump a flow of water over the gills. This is what your goldfish does at home, your pet goldfish. It'll open its mouth, close the gill cover, then it'll close its mouth and open the gill cover, and water flows through. We call this the dual pump mechanism. It's basically, again, alternating in synchrony flow between the mouth and the operculum. So you get mouth opens, operculum closes. That pulls water in. When you expand the buccal cavity, it creates negative pressure, water flows in. And close the mouth, open the gills, and then compress the gill chamber, and the water is ejected. So suction phase and an expulsion or force phase, the water moves out. Air-breathing fishes and then amphibians like frogs and salamanders can do this too. And we went over the buccal pump and we talked about specializations during the vertebrate diversity lectures earlier this semester. So basically, the buccal pump is a little bit different because instead of moving water, we're moving air. So open the mouth, brings air in, close the mouth, force it to the lung. Simple step from the mouth, to the lung. Amniotes have aspiration pump, where it's basically movements of the thoracic cavity to change pressure in the chest to ventilate the lung. So we think about the cat anatomy. We looked at, you probably saw the diaphragm muscle a couple weeks ago, and you'll definitely see it today. The diaphragm acts as the pump, and the structure of the chest acts as the pump as well, to basically bring air into the lungs with aspiration. So essentially, you get pressure changes in the chest. When the chest expands, the inspiratory muscles, right, the diaphragm will flatten out, the chest will expand. That creates negative pressure, air sucked in. And then to expel air, you compress the thorax, let the diaphragm go back to its resting state where it's kind of domed. That forces air out. So it's not that you're breathing air in and expelling it. It's literally changes in pressures relative to the environment. That air is sucked into the lung or forced out of the lung, kind of like a bellows. If you think of a bellows, they used to basically stoke a fire, right? To put air on a fire to keep the fire breathing.
I'll talk about breathing and these other mechanisms next class. Let me just try to, I don't know what these words are. Yeah, I want you to read, you gotta flash back to chapter 4 and read just the pages 156, 158. This is talking about counter current exchange. And I'll discuss what this is, but try to read this and maybe look in on chapter 11, and then I'll do this stuff on Wednesday. Lab today at 1.